Good afternoon, everyone. We just hit noon. I am Jen Bordeaux, the Director of Public Relations with New Direction Family Law, coming at you with another segment of Family Law Uncorked. As your daily reminder, for those of us that are still working from home and remotely, today is May the 28th. So we are almost there into June. It's starting to feel a little like summer, super rainy and humid right now, but nonetheless, hope this all finds you all well and you enjoyed your Memorial Day holiday. I am joined today with Dan Thompson of the Dan Thompson Insurance Agency, and we wanted to discuss some facts around insurance and divorce that maybe you don't think of unless obviously you're going through the situation, but they're kind of common questions. You're used to insurance, and everybody has to have it for their car or their home, or but when it comes to divorce, it can be a little bit different of an animal, and people have some pretty common questions around insurance that Dan can absolutely answer for us. So Dan, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you don't mind, just start off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about DTA.
Hey, Jen, thanks for having me. My name is Dan Thompson. The agency's Dan Thompson Agency. We've been right around the Crabtree area in a location or two for the last 28 years. There's almost no kind of personal insurance or commercial insurance that we don't do. And unfortunately, over 28 years, we've been in the middle of a lot of the situations that you and I are going to talk about. And it's probably going to be worth talking about.
Awesome. And so where is your office located?
We're right off of Glenwood, just north, that's not north, is it just west of Crabtree Valley, on Ferry Hill Drive. Gotcha.
Okay. So lots of experience surrounding insurance, and I know you guys were a primary provider of one carrier, but you are in the works and very close. You're going to be pretty much an independent insurance agency. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting thing. Imagine, so we've been with the same company now for 28 years, and we are going to be more of a brokerage environment after July, which from the client perspective and our perspective is a really good thing, because we'll have options where in the past, it's just been the one carrier, but now we've already got a dozen other carriers that we're using, and it gives clients choices, opportunities, and gives us an opportunity to do some stuff that the one carrier may not have been comfortable with in the past as far as risk is concerned.
Awesome. I love the broadening of the services. That's great. So insurance, something we all have to have on varying different levels, but that we don't really realize how much we need until we actually need it. One of those things, you got to make that monthly payment, not super happy about it, but then whenever you need it, you're sure glad you have it. So specifically speaking to insurance and divorce, I mean, when you go through a divorce, there's a lot that changes, a lot that has to be figured out, a lot of questions that surround that. So, is someone going to stay in the marital home? And if so, who's that going to be? And if not, we're going to sell it. And how is all that going to work? What's the new situation with the kids going to look like if there are kids involved? All that kind of stuff. So one of those things that is affected is insurance, because married couples tend to be on the same policy. If there are teenage drivers, you have drivers on that policy. So then if it comes time for a divorce, then what happens? If you have a dependent spouse that has been on the supporting spouse, or the spouse that's, has employment benefits with insurance, then what happens? All these kinds of questions. So that's what we have you here, the expert here, to answer for us today. So if you're watching live and you have any questions, we welcome those. If not, we will get right into it as we go along. So you and I have spoken in the past about this particular issue, just not live. And I know that you have come across the issue, the question or the scenario of someone calling you and saying, I want to get him or her off of my policy. So can that happen? Let's just start with that. Can someone do that?
So that's a question we fielded lots of times, and it's just especially so if you've got one spouse that's paying bills, they may be sort of chomping at the bit to get the other person off the insurance policy, and so the question oftentimes is, I want this person off of this policy. take them off today. And here's where I'm going to tell you that you can't do that. Now, there are a lot of things that we can do, but one is contact the other spouse, make them aware of what we're doing, and then we'll either. But if that doesn't want to, if that's something that this person doesn't want to do, then maybe the thing to do is to write a separate policy for that person, and then leave the other car or cars or drivers on the existing, and then that'll be another conversation with us with that spouse. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So from what I'm understanding, if somebody calls you and says, I want to take them off my policy, that can't happen.
No, and normally, so it would either be, look, this is the option that we just discussed, or, let me talk to him or her, and we'll figure out how we're going to take care of this. Sometimes, and you know this better than I do, sometimes these things, everybody's kind of on the same page, and then sometimes they're in different countries, and I don't mean literally, you know what I mean? And so, you just have to deal with it wherever it is at that time.
Yeah. I mean, you just touched on a great point as far as sometimes the culture of family law and in a divorce, and that it can be very emotionally driven, which makes sense given the nature of family law and what is being dealt with and navigated through and everything. So sometimes when emotions run very high, and especially if it's not in an amicable situation, and one spouse or the other or both, feel very slighted, they don't want to have anything to do. They don't want to be anything associated with their spouse. So when that time comes, is there a reason that one spouse should change insurance agents or carriers within this, from the company that they were previously on the same policy with?
Yeah, I think so. So again, all these carriers are different, and as we move to these different carriers, we're learning their underwriting guidelines and appetites. But from Nationwide, who's been our largest carrier for all these years, as soon as there's a separation agreement signed, then you can separate cars. If this is not, and I don't want to use the word amicable, but a workable situation, right? We don't have everybody kind of working together. It may really make good sense to get off on your own, so that accidents or things like that are not going to show up on the other. And then if one person's paying that bill, and then they decide that they don't want to pay that bill, to create a challenge for the other spouse, all those things. We've got a lot of couples that have separated and divorced that are still in the agency, but some that just tell us, hey, I really feel like I need a new agent and a new insurance company, and need to be completely separate. If that's where the comfort level is, then that's certainly what they ought to do.
Okay. What about, so I know just from our, like you just said, once the separation agreement is signed, then, so when is the appropriate time to make that change? If you have a spouse that calls you and says, I want to remove this person from my policy, we're not legally separated yet, and we've kind of established that you can't really do that. Now, what if it's the other spouse that calls you and says, I don't want to remove someone from my policy, but I want to establish my own policy? Can that spouse do that?
The separation agreement, yeah. Through underwriting, they would work with us on that, and we could get that done.
Okay.
But we've got couples that so one of the biggest in the automobile insurance side. Let's talk about costs for a second. On the automobile insurance side, the biggest discount that you can get in North Carolina with any carrier is the multi-vehicle discount, right? So we assume that if you're married, that there's a chance that both of you are going to be in the same vehicle at some point. And so there's a really large, like a 30% discount for having two cars. So if you've got a couple that can work through this thing together, we've had them stay on the policy all the way up until the date that it's, the year passes and that it's final, and they've kept everything together through that period of time. and maybe have had where one's going into the home with the kids, that situation, and kept it all the way through there. But that's the time that it really needs to be changed. There's not, this thing, as you guys know, they're all so different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's patterns there can be some similar patterns and situations, but yes, absolutely. Everyone's situation is unique to their, their personal preference, as well as, what's going on with the family, especially if there's kids involved. So, so you can really have the choice of keeping some, cars on the same policy, but you're saying that once they're legally no longer married, then that's really when a change has to happen as far as the policy is concerned.
They need to separate them. At the same, they also ought to, if they've got joint title on cars, it stinks to have to pay that. I don't know if they call it a use fee or whatever North Carolina calls it, but you should probably go down and get your vehicles retitled. And you're going to somebody who, if one person keeps the house versus selling it, there'll need to be those D changes there as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about youthful drivers. So if there are children that are, 16 or up, or are you required to get insurance for your kid whenever they get their permit, or once they become like an individual driver?
No, what's interesting is probably when they've got their permit is when you're the biggest risk. But you cannot get any premium for that young driver until they actually have a valid driver's license.
There's license.
So they drive on, they go through the different steps that they have to go through. But here's the thing, so let's say you've got 2 cars, 2 drivers. We're adding a third driver with no experience. The rate change for that driver, let's choose 2.5%. So the rate change for that driver is 2.5 times. And unfortunately, we often get stuck in the middle of this, as well, so-and-so is living there. I don't want to, and I've currently got a situation going on where what we decided to do was switch the car drivers. So the car's titled in mom's name. Mom's going to continue to insure the car. The young man's living with dad. So he's actually going to pay to have the youthful driver charge on his policy. But when you're talking about a 2.5 times number, you can imagine this could be a real bone of contention, and it needs to be, if people can get some awareness of this, they can start to handle these things early on, because better than I do that there are these crazy little things that sit out there. The things seem like they're going along fine, and just the weirdest things throw a monkey wrench in everything.
Yeah, especially with finances. I mean, and that's why it's so great to have such a great team around you whenever you're going through this situation, because, from the legal side, we can help you as far as finances surrounding, child support and, the marital property and what's going to happen there, and cars, as far as, whose name needs to be on what, how all that's going to work out. But when it comes to then that strategy, as far as like having a youthful driver of, like that scenario you just mentioned, some of that could depend upon what happens legally as far as custody is concerned, or, child support numbers or whatever. But having that insurance team behind you that has seen these different scenarios is largely beneficial, because they can help you, just understand and decide what's going to work best for your particular situation. So that's great information to know.
Yeah, especially if you can catch it early on, right? So as you guys are figuring all this out, if you know it going in, it's fine. It's when you've got to stop and start readjusting because it never came up or nobody was aware of it. And I think you're exactly right. I think having a team of people helping work with this probably is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, and if nothing else, because there's as we've said before, there's the emotional side of divorce. So while you're figuring all of that out as well, which can be such a huge side of it, then you've got all these other logistical decisions that need to be made too. So that's why just having a team in all these different facets can be so beneficial, and just can help alleviate some of the unnecessary stress that can be associated with divorce and all, because you're making a lot of decisions at one time, it seems like. And so the more help you can have with that, it really can help provide some clarity and provide decision making for the long term, not just for an emotionally driven immediate decision. So definitely good information to know, and to play those scenarios back and forth, even before a decision is made and necessarily put into writing what's going to happen, but to be able to come to you and say, hey, this is what I've got going on. What are my options? That way, going into, and you can then discuss with your attorney, what would work best or what options are for the situation. So awesome things to know. Okay, let's talk about the house. So let's say one spouse, we'll say the husband is taking the house, but the wife has a rider on the policy for the diamond engagement ring. How is that handled with insurance?
So again, a really common occurrence. And let's say there's some husband's watches. Let's say there are a number of pieces on there. You need to get them separated. Mm-hmm. The thing for the person that will not have the house is you really can't have that rider as a standalone. So the other spouse should get a renter's insurance product if they're not going to buy a house right up front to cover their personal property. And then you can attach that rider to that policy. You can have a standalone rider, but most carriers require there be property insurance as well. That rider is its own product. So let's say you've got $1,000 deductible on your home. The rider you can write those with a zero deductible. And the biggest thing about these riders are they cover mysterious disappearance. So, that one odd scenario that you can say, my diamond ring is gone. And the insurance company will actually pay the value for that ring. But, just to make sure that going in that this thing's there and that you make sure you take care of it prior to separating that property. We have seen these things go on for 2 or 3 years and somebody come back and, hey, Dan, how come you guys didn't do this? You guys didn't tell me anything about it. Yeah. Well, I want this money back. You're going to have to talk to, so, again, one of those things to be thinking about if that situation occurs, because it does come up. Yeah. And in really contentious situations, we had God, 5 years ago, the diamond was like $50,000 and it disappeared. The problem was somebody had it. And I don't know if we ever got down to actually had it, but those things come up. Yeah, definitely. So obviously, as far as types of insurance that you guys offer, obviously home and auto. And then sometimes something else that can come up in divorce situations is if one or both of the spouses own a business. So you guys offer commercial insurance as well. Life insurance? Sure.
Okay. So pretty much maybe the only thing you don't offer is health insurance.
It's health insurance. And unfortunately, a lot of times, that's an issue for one of y'all's clients, because one's been on the spouse's health insurance, and then I'm sure you've run across this all the time. And I don't know how that works. I'm assuming that one can be carried for a particular period of time, and then they have to go find it elsewhere. Is that right?
Yeah, usually it's outlined in the separation agreement as to if there is a spouse that's been on the other one's benefits, that all of that is usually put into a separation agreement. If it's not, you didn't have a good family law attorney. You know what I mean? Exactly. Those things are very important. For them and the kids and everything that surrounds that. So, but what's great is that's why, with you and I knowing each other, and then I know that I'm sure we both have through our network contacts for health insurance, because that can be its own headache and ball game as far as figuring all of that out. It's overwhelming, and with the with government provided insurance, I mean, that's its own headache to deal with and try to navigate alone. So it's great. There are independent health insurance agents out there that can assist you with figuring out what works best and for your budget and everything. So Dan, I appreciate you joining me. Anything else that we don't have any questions live, but if you're watching this later on and you come up with some questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly at the firm at New Direction or to Dan at the Dan Thompson Agency. But anything else you would say just to wrap us up or in conclusion as far as insurance and the divorce situation is concerned?
So from our perspective, we understand, right? I went through a divorce years ago, and the attorney, as nice a guy as he was, said to me, what you need to understand is from here on out, this is just a business deal. And I was like, well, I hear you, but
it feels like more than that.
It's way more than a business deal. So we're empathetic and have been through it and understand there are a lot of things that have to be dealt with, and some of these things are emotional, and you get through it, right? And we'll help. And if you've got questions for us, as behind the scenes, just to get some perspective on something, then certainly give us a shout.
Well, we did just get a comment pop up, not a question, but a testimonial to you from Kelly Thompson that said, Dan Thompson is such an amazing agent. Love him and his agency. So I echo those sentiments. I have a couple of policies with you guys, and looking to have future policies with the home buying experience, and have loved working with your office and one of the agents there that I know. So thank you for the work, and y'all watching this, Dan's just a good guy to know. He's been in the industry for a long time. He's been around for, I'm not gonna say a long time because I don't want to speak to age or anything.
No, a long time.
But he's been around, and if he can't do it, I can almost guarantee you he knows somebody that can. So Dan, again, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your experience and expertise on this topic. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Again, if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to the Dan Thompson Agency, and we will get you taken care of. So Dan, once again, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. For those watching, and we'll see you next time.
I appreciate you. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Bye.